I wanted to give up so often, and it hasn't changed since. I just can't step away now because, you know, I became like a symbol of freedom. They voted for me not as for a person, not as for future president, but just like a symbol of changes. Why I can't declare myself as president? Because we know for sure that the elections were falsificated. But I can accept that I was chosen by people as national leader. And, you know, I just can't come and say, I'm president, you have to obey. No, it's absolutely not about me. I want the Belarusians to live in a free country, in safe country, where they are not afraid to speak, where they are not afraid to be grabbed on the streets if they are not agree with something. I'm more frightened than anybody else among them, but I just can't give up.
A very warm welcome to this special program, How to Save Democracy, with Sviatlana Tsikhanouskaya. Very warm welcome to you. We just saw a short movie made by the Four Freedom Awards, which you won the other day. Congratulations with it.
Thank you.
It might be good to mention that other people who won it are, for instance, Václav Havel or Nelson Mandela or Angela Merkel. It's a remarkable award, and I think they're absolutely right to give it to you. I think we're living through historic moments, historic times. We have been organizing programs on the situation in Eastern Europe, and especially Belarus, for a long time, for years, really for years. We've invited Natalia Kalyada and Nikolai Kaledjin, the founders of the Belarus 3 Theater. We've invited Andrei Sannikov, a former presidential candidate like yourself. All three of them told us stories of how they've been tortured. They told us stories which I couldn't hardly listen to. And we phoned to journalists. They didn't come. We phoned to the audience. We tried to invite the audience. They didn't come. People didn't come. They didn't realize what was happening and how important it was for years. But now we are in a full house again, and there's a lot of attention for the situation in Belarus, and I'm very happy about it, though it's rather late. You have been involved in the democratic movement for years. We applaud you for that, and I think it's an honor for us, a great honor that you're here to share your thoughts and what you lived through with us. Maybe to start off, just a little description about where you came from and what you've been doing over the past years. You've been a teacher, interpreter, and you are self-described as a former housewife. You describe yourself sometimes living in Belarus, and then your husband, Sergei Tikhanovsky, was arrested in May 2020. He was a presidential candidate. And you announced your ambition to run for president instead, in his place. I understood that your main goal actually was to pave the way for free and fair elections after you and your coalition would have won, and have a real election afterwards under circumstances which were not controlled by Alexander Lukashenko. But Lukashenko did win. The exit polls showed an 80% margin for him, which of course was a stolen election, which has been confirmed by the observers of the OSCE that the election was stolen. And you filed a complaint on the election night about the election and the ongoing elections, after which you were detained for 7 hours, I believe. And then you fled the country, and ever since have been a strong ambassador for democracy and the movement in Belarus. Again, I would say give Sviatlana Tsikhanouskaya a very warm welcome. We're very, very happy that you're here. Maybe I can start off with a few personal questions, if I may. I've heard you say that before the elections, you said, well, I have to choose between my two children, and putting this through, going through with this election against Lukashenko. I mean, that's an impossible choice, I would say.
In this fight, everybody has to choose. Has to choose to stay at home silently or go to the streets and show his or her desire for changes. Sacrifice with freedom or, be a slave of this system. Mm-hmm. And I had to choose between children and my pre-election campaign twice, or election campaign. The first time I decided to send when I got a phone call from a unknown person who told me, look, if you don't stop, you will be jailed and your children will be put in orphanage. I decided to send my children out of the country in case if I'm detained, they will be at least in safeness.
You were phoned by, do you know who?
No, it was an unknown person.
It's a threat on the telephone.
Yeah, for sure it was somebody from KGB or, all those Lukashenko's cronies. Mm-hmm. The second time when I was proposed the choice, it was after the election, the 10th of August, when I went to Central Election Commission to print the paper that people of Belarus are not agree with results of the election. I was met there by two highly ranked KGB people, and I had very difficult conversation with them. And again, it was choice. You have to flee the country because you will be put in jail for years, and your husband is already in jail, so you will not see your children for, 10, 15 years. And at that moment, my internal mother won, and I made this choice, very difficult choice for me, because I felt that, it's like you are betraying people because you are living, because of your own fears. But I made the choice at that moment. So, and on contrary, for example, Masha Kolesnikova, my comrade, she was made to flee the country. KGB people brought her to the border and they wanted her to leave the country, but she tore her passport. And she was put in jail, and she knew the consequences, but it was her choice at that moment. The same as my husband, he knew that he will be for sure be jailed for his position, for his YouTube channel, but it was his choice. Everybody is choosing.
Do you understand the choice of your husband?
I understand the choice of my husband. I understand the choice of Masha Kolesnikova and Viktor Balie. I understand the choice of all those hundreds, thousands of people who went to the rallies against Lukashenko's regime, who knew that they can sacrifice with their health, with their freedom, and some with lives. But they felt each other at that moment. We woke up as real nation that are proud to be Belarusians. And I always was nearby my husband. Though I wasn't in politics, I just watching his streams from home, but I knew that it was important for him. I knew that it was important for him to change people for better, to open people's eyes, you know, to show them the truth about this regime, about our country, about perspectives of our country. So he became enemy of Lukashenko, and he knew this. But all those people who are in jail, all those people who had to flee the country because of repressions, they are all brave people. So I understand them very well.
Yeah. You said something very beautiful. You said we awoke as a nation, as a country. That's just the last few years. There were these mass demonstrations. I mean, we looked at it on television and saw thousands and thousands of people, you know, day after day in the cold, being beaten up and being marching. Were you surprised by the sudden surge after more than 2 decades of dictatorship?
You know, maybe somewhere inside of our souls we knew that something like this will happen one day. But it was a surprise for many of us.
Yeah.
You know, during these 28 already years of dictatorship, we got used to the idea that we can't do anything with this. That, look, I'm alone. What can I do?
Yeah.
And after each elections in our country, some quantity of people went to rallies to show their attitude to fraudulent elections, but the most of Belarusians were apolitical. They didn't want to participate in the fate of Belarus. You know, they lived with their own small lives and take care about their families, and they didn't want to think globally. They didn't want to take responsibility for Belarus. Belarus really had difficult fate, and people remember poor Soviet times when there was poverty, hunger, and you know, people wanted to survive, and it was too difficult to think global about country. There is some Lukashenko, he will invent something, and we felt like slaves in our country. We didn't want to change anything, but and I'm grateful to those people who every 5 years after each fraudulent elections, they went out to the streets to show their attitude. But most of people, including me, were absolutely, you know, we felt pity for those people, but didn't understand, look, I'm also responsible for this. I'm also responsible for the future of my children. But 2020 was different. And when new generation grew up, internet appeared, a lot of people understand that, look, we deserve to live better. We are wonderful, hardworking people who just have poor manager as the president. And people one by one started to wake up, and when we saw that I'm not alone who wants something better for our country, we saw each other, we felt shoulders of each other, and we understood, look, we are Belarusians, we are a proud nation, and we are strong enough to get rid of the regime. At that moment, of course, maybe we underestimated the cruelty of the regime, but we we'll always remember those closeness between people. And this united out of all of us, and for 2 years already we are fighting. People are exhausted, people are tired, but they every day move forward, very small steps, but they know that we are, with every step, we are closer and closer to our final aim. And
you said, I mean, you stepped into the footsteps of your husband. You know, when your husband got arrested, you said, I will go in his place, you know, to run for president. And can you remember the moment, because you said we were alone and then we suddenly found each other. Can you remember the moment when you decided to take that step?
When I came from the Central Election Commission, where my husband was denied as a candidate. I came home and thought, look, he's my husband. I have to be nearby him. I have to show that what he was doing for people is important for me too. So my first step wasn't for country. I didn't make it because I felt responsibility for future of Belarus. It was only for the love to my husband, just to show him that he's important to me. But this understanding that I'm part of Belarusian nation, that I'm part of Belarusian people came to me much later when I saw all the queues of the people who wanted to put signatures for their candidates, for Tsikhanouskaya, Balie, and Tsipkala. And step by step, I felt myself part of Belarusians. It was also like awakening for me as well. So I decided alone. I haven't been consulting with anybody. But I admit that I made it not for people. I made it for husband. First step. Then, of course, everything has changed.
Yeah, because then you became a symbol for the whole nation. And as far as we can tell, you won the election. Did that surprise you as well?
Not really. At the 9th of August, everything was evident that Lukashenko will lose these elections. And we had opportunity to check. We had alternative counting of voices, and we had evidences that he lost. Of course, nobody expected that he will write real numbers in the final ballots, and people were ready to protest. They were ready to say that, look, we are enough with you. We don't want you anymore. You lost our support, and then so on. So the results, real results of elections didn't surprise me. So according to alternative accounting, it was about, I know here representative of alternative counted, yes, he can, it was about 62% that Tsikhanouskaya won the elections.
That's you. 62%. I was at the microphone there, but for the people who were watching at home, 62%. Yeah, that's huge.
It's huge, and it's like the number can be much higher. We can't evaluate the full scale of election, as far as I understand. So, but in the mind of people. There is, understanding that Lukashenko has only 3% of support among Belarusians.
Yeah.
Lukashenko 3%.
Yeah, that's probably the OMO, the riot police, and not many more than that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some people from nomenclatura.
And isn't that also? I mean, that must be such a responsibility. It must be frightening as well for you.
It is frightening because it's really a huge responsibility, because you don't have any political background. You have to make difficult decisions, and you understand that sometimes fate depends on your decisions. But you have to do this because people believed in you, and you're afraid maybe you can make mistake, it is difficult, but you can't say, look, I don't want to do this. You have to. You don't have opportunity to give up. You don't have opportunity to step away, because there is no another person who is legitimate. People chose you, so please go forward.
It's not easy.
It's not easy. It's not easy emotionally. It's not easy physically. Sometimes you're so exhausted. that you think, look, I can't do this anymore. But every time you think about all those people behind the bars, about your husband, about our women journalists, about people who are being beaten every day in jail, who are humiliated, who, in awful conditions, and say, look, you have to get up and go on what you are doing, because they believe in you, they believe in Belarusians, that they will be released. Lukashenko's regime will not release them because all of them are enemies to Lukashenko. But it's our task of Belarusian people to release all those who sacrificed with their life to give us opportunity to continue. And administration and jails, they always want to persuade all our comrades that they are abandoned, that nobody take care about you anymore. That's why I all the time urge people in every country I visit, write letters to political prisoners. Don't underestimate the meaning of this. When a person gets letters, he knows that people remember about him, that fight is going on, because there is informational isolation there. Mm-hmm. And just getting these letters is maybe the only hope, for them. So write letters, my dear Dutch people.
Your husband has just been sentenced to 18 years. That's very saddening, of course. Makes you more responsible for your children, much more even. But I was wondering, are you in contact? Can you write to him or can you talk to him?
I can write letters, but no one of my letters I have written to many political prisoners wasn't delivered. I can't communicate with my husband directly, but I send short messages through the lawyer who visits him once a week, and this is all. My children can write letters to their daddy, and he gets letters from children. So there is a mail change in between them, and I'm so happy about this. And my older son, when he's writing, he already knows that you don't have to write all the information for KGB people. Don't know wouldn't know what his son wanted to say to their dad. It's so interesting to see how children, study to circumvent all the restrictions. But I'm happy that they have this opportunity to communicate. And at home, it's, I have to explain, I once explained my children where is their daddy. And my 11-year-old son understands everything, that daddy in prison, Lukashenko, that people are fighting. But for my 6-year-old daughter, the word prison means nothing. She can't imagine what it is. She's asking me every evening, so when my daddy will come, and it's so it's difficult to hear this, and it's important. Young children, they can forget people very fast, so that's why the portrait of my husband is everywhere in our apartment, and we are watching his video streams, for her not to forget his image. She misses him a lot. Yeah.
I imagine. Yeah, it's already 2 years. That's a third of her life. Yeah. And you said in the introduction film, which was made by the Four Freedoms Award, you said, "I'm more afraid than all those people on the street, brave people on the street." In the introduction film, you can hear you say that. I do understand that, because you have 2 children in the first place, and but on the other hand, I'm rather surprised to hear you say that, because what you do is amazingly brave and very impactful. So how come? How would you describe yourself as more afraid of the people on the street?
I don't remember in what context I said this, because
I can understand.
it was this video maybe was written many months ago, and when I watched this video on this award, I really wanted to remember why I'm afraid more than people on the streets, because I couldn't remember why I said this, because I actually can't even imagine how people were scared going out, with flags on demonstrations, knowing that they can be detained at any moment. I was in Lithuania. I haven't participated in any of the rallies. I haven't felt moods there, because, for example, at the beginning, I was sure that people are. During these rallies, people are scared. But when I started to communicate with people, especially at the beginning, when the rallies were huge and there was huge inspiration among people, people told me that we were so happy. We were so happy to see each other. Of course, when brutality started, when every demonstration ended with new detentions, this happiness changed for fear. But despite this fear, people went out to the streets. So I really don't remember why I said so. I'm sure that it was much more difficult to go to the streets, than to do what I.
Yeah, I can understand what you mean in that respect. Yes, yes. Because if you know that you are going to a big chance to be arrested and beaten up and tortured, yes, and that's what they do. Yeah, it takes a lot of courage. Yeah. The surprising thing after you announced that you would take up the elections yourself was that the opposition in Belarusia united around you. There were two other women who, actually, the three of you decided that you would unite as a opposition and put you as the central candidate forward. That was rather surprising. Was that due to the fact that Alexander Lukashenko underestimated women, you think?
So first of all, regime couldn't predict that three candidates, representatives of candidates, will unite. Even people in Belarus couldn't predict this. But our desire to get rid of the regime, our desire to bring our countries for changes was so strong that this unity happened in 7 minutes after we met first time with Masha and Veronika. And for sure,
7 minutes?
7 minutes.
And where did you meet?
We met in Minsk for the first time, and we communicated for 7 minutes and decided that...
Was that at somebody's home, or was it in a cafe?
No, it was in the office of Viktor Babalika.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I had to say that when Lukashenko's regime let me participate in this pre-election campaign, they wanted to make love of me. They were sure that nobody will vote for a woman, for a housewife without any political experience. So
they might have been happy that they thought they can make fun of you.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Mm-hmm. They didn't expect this unity. They didn't expect such uprising of people, because they lost connection with Belarusian people. Regime have been living in their own bubble for so many years. They lost this connection with people. They didn't catch that people changed, that new generation grew up, that we want more, that we want better for our country. And I think the fact that we united scared regime.
Yeah.
And but it was too late already.
So yes, underestimation. He was too secure after that. And then he had to beat everybody up and arrest them. Yeah. After the award was presented to you yesterday in Middelburg, the Four Freedom Award. Our Prime Minister, Mark Rutte, handed it out to you, together with the great-great-granddaughter, I think, of Roosevelt. Here we see it, and we see our Prime Minister applauding. And he, what did he say to you in his address? Do you remember?
In this?
Well, maybe not. But what did he applaud you in the public? Was the public there when? Did he say something in public to you?
He had a speech. Telling the audience about Belarusian fight, how brave Belarusians are. He told about political prisoners, about the importance of Belarusian fight. But we met with Mark Rutte before the ceremony, and we had about 1 hour meeting. I'm always warmly welcomed here in the Netherlands, and I really appreciate this country. The Netherlands have been supporting Belarus before 2020, during and after. And so I see that he is very sympathetic about our country, about our fight, and he really wants to help us in our fight.
Yeah. Because he also tweeted about it. Let's have a look at the tweet if we can see it. It was an honor to present her with the 2022 International Four Freedoms Award, together with President Franklin D. Roosevelt, great-great-granddaughter. When I spoke to Mrs. Tsikhanouskaya, I expressed my deep respect and assured her of the Netherlands' full support. That's wonderful, I thought. And what do you think would full support? What do you hope? What do you expect of full support?
It means, I'm sure, support on political level. It's non-recognition of Lukashenko's regime. It's political and economical isolation of this regime. It's support to civil society. It's support for our media, for our initiatives, organizations, because we understand that the transition period will sooner or later come to our country, and we have to have healthy, sustainable civil society, and we need assistance, and the Netherlands are rather supportive and helpful in this. And during this meeting with the Prime Minister, and during my meeting with Minister of Defense and parliamentarians, I told how it's important to support Belarusians who are fighting in Ukraine at the moment for our Belarusian battalions, to our doctors, and I delivered them the list of requests from our Belarusian medics that are working in Ukrainian hospitals, the list of necessary equipment, just helmets, just to protective equipment for our volunteers. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure that the Netherlands will send this assistance to our volunteers alongside with the help to Ukrainian people. That's
very impressive, and that's very. Because I don't think many people know that, actually, that there's volunteers from Belarusian cities and villages fighting in Ukraine with the Ukrainian army. Yeah. And so you asked the Minister of Defense, Kai Shalongren, and the Prime Minister to help them, to support them?
The Netherlands are supporting Ukraine and Ukrainians in this war a lot, but it's very important to show separate support for Belarusians, mm-hmm. to show them that the world knows about their fight. Yeah. They're fighting now on behalf of Belarusians with the Russian invasion. They are fighting for Ukraine and for Belarus, and it's important to pay as much attention to them as possible. And it will be very significant stamp from Dutch government.
Yeah, because You met with Wopke Hoekstra, Kajsa Ollongren, our Minister of Foreign Affairs, our Minister of Defense, our Prime Minister, and they let us know, they let me personally know, that because we asked all ministers and Sigrid Kaag to meet you in public, but they rather meet you in private. So they let me know on privately that yes, we're very supportive. She's amazing, but in public, speaking to you, I think was, I don't know. So I was wondering whether they really, in private at least, you know, pledged the support of the Dutch government to your case and to Belarus.
I didn't catch your question, honestly speaking.
Well, I'm a bit puzzled by the fact that our ministers, and I hope, and I'm really happy about the tweet our Prime Minister put out, that the full support, but I'm really hoping that in private they told you that they will support the Belarusian cause and your cause.
Look, of course, you know, when I meet politicians and they say privately and then publicly that they are ready to support us, so what's...
Well, that's good. That's
no. I have to say that Mark Rutte is very honest with the Dutch people, and he's the Prime Minister I met most. 3 times I met Mark Rutte, and he was never he never told that, look, I can meet with you privately but not publicly.
Okay.
You know,
yeah. Well, that's good for that citizen to hear, because sometimes I have to say we wonder whether the European Union, the Dutch government, the West is supportive enough with the democratic cause in Belarus.
I have to say that the closer country to Belarus, the more supportive they are.
Yeah.
Because when you are a neighbor, you see what's going on. Because for countries like Italy, Spain, they also want to do something. They're doing a lot on political level. It's also important to vote for something if Belarus on agenda. But of course, when you are not in the everyday life, they have their own agenda. Of course, it's not very close to them. But in many parliaments, groups of Friends of Belarus were created. A lot of parliamentarians took parenthood over political prisoners. They're communicating with families of political prisoners. They're writing letters to him. They're helping the children. A lot of MPs writing letters, on a constant basis. Very often, of course, we hear more words of support and less actions, but we understand everything. It's our fight, but we always say that it's moral obligation of every country who shares values with us Belarusians have to help. As Roosevelt told that if you see the country who is fighting for the freedoms, for freedoms, you have to help them. So we shouldn't feel abandoned. Ukrainians shouldn't feel abandoned as well. And now I'm really glad and I'm really proud that Belarusians was the nation that united Europe, because there was absolute consensus among countries, among parties, among people about Belarusian fight. Peaceful demonstrations, peaceful determination, and brutality of the regime. And it was amazing to see how united democratic forces were in Belarus and how united Europe was.
That's a good point. Here we see the amazing turnout in some of the demonstrations, and I think we have to realize that people are there, actually are in peril. They're there and they can be arrested, tortured, shot. So it's not just a nice outing on a summer day. But coming back to that, I look upon you as Madam President. You were elected. Lukashenko stole the elections. We could have not recognized the sitting president of Belarus. We could have. We didn't. So yes, there was moral support, and it's a very, very good point you're making, that in a way you managed to unite Europe on a democratic stance and on democratic values. But they didn't recognize you, they recognized Lukashenko.
Who they?
They, the European Union, the American government, the international community.
I wouldn't say so, because I see that Lukashenko's regime is politically isolated at the moment. And for 2 years, almost nobody communicated to him. Lukashenko hijacked Ryanair flight. Lukashenko launched this migration crisis to threaten Europe. Everything was done to make him important for Europe again, to make other countries start communicating to him. And I'm really proud of European people, European countries, that they managed to solve these problems without communicating to Lukashenko. There were some phone calls to him from Angela Merkel, and I know who somebody else phoned him, and this is what he wanted. Talk to me. I'm important. I'm still here. Hey, and but somehow democratic countries managed to communicate with us, avoiding communicating with Lukashenko. Of course, he is there. Of course, he has his KGB people. He can threat Belarusians. But country is not about president or army. Country is about people. And until Belarusian people don't accept him, they will never accept Lukashenko. Until they want changes, until they didn't get used to the situation, and our country will fight against this regime. They will fight for a better future. And the fact that I was recognized on the international level on behalf of Belarusian people, it tells a lot. I'm meeting with the presidents, prime ministers, and this is about recognition. A lot of ambassadors come to us to communicate. Countries don't send any ambassadors to Belarus,
Minsk,
because not to recognize Lukashenko. It's like very small. They're not small, but it's very important steps showing that Lukashenko is not power. He's nobody for in the eyes of Belarusian people, in the eyes of international community. So that's it. So he can sit there, but he's not considered to be president by majority of countries.
And now we have a real war in Ukraine. Were you surprised that Putin would actually really go to war? I think it surprised a lot of people in the West.
Maybe surprise, it's not correct word. I really, honestly, couldn't believe in this till the war has started. Though we have communicated with some military people, with some results of intelligence. We saw the results of intelligence, but till the last I thought that all these troops on the border with Ukraine, all these so-called military drills on the territory of Belarus were only for demoralizing Ukrainians, for threatening European countries that, look, we have such a huge and powerful army. It was a shock for me when the war has started. And, I was sure that our people, Ukrainians, Russians, and Belarusians, suffered so much during the World War II, and I was sure that we can't repeat this. It's impossible. Every fourth person died at that war. But I thought as a rational person, and we maybe underestimated the cruelty, madness of Kremlin and Lukashenko as well. Yeah.
It's an amazing but true fact that a quarter of the populations of the stretch of land, between from Lithuania through Belarus to Ukraine died during World War II. I don't think many people here in Western Europe understand, the amount of suffering there. It's an important fact to the amount of cruelty which happened there in the last century. But did that, is this war affecting maybe your strive or the democratic strive in Belarus? Is that worsening the situation, or is that maybe for the people there that's one thing, and for the democratic movement that's another thing? But
absolutely not. We understood when the war has started that now we have double work. We have to continue fight against regime, but now we have to fight on the side of Ukraine as well, because we Ukrainians are our brothers and sisters, and we had to support them. We had to show that we are Belarusian people against the war, because as you know that from Lukashenko dragged our country into this war. He led Russian troops to launch missiles and aircrafts that were bombing Ukrainian territory. Bucha was bombed from Belarus. Maternity hospital.
That's one of the cities next to Kiev. Yeah.
Chernihiv was bombed from Belarus, and we understood that our country is considered to be a co-aggressor in this war, and it was crucially important for us to divide Lukashenko's regime and Belarusian people. For Belarusians, everything was understandable. We are not the same. Is Lukashenko responsible for the war? He became accomplice of Putin. But for a lot of Ukrainians, for a lot of Polish people who haven't lived with our fight, political prisoners were not their pain. They lived with their own life, and they didn't care a lot about what's going on in Belarus. And when the war has started, we became enemies, and we had to launch a huge campaign, explanational campaign to Ukrainian people that, look, we are not Lukashenko, we are not regime, we want to help you. And when the war has started, the next Sunday, hundreds of thousands of people went to the streets, knowing the consequences, knowing that they could be detained as in 2020, but they did this to show that they are against the war. At that day, about 1.5 thousand people have been detained. A lot of people, right after interrogations, went to the hospitals because they have been brutally beaten as usual. It's normality for our interrogations.
If you look at the pictures of the people being beaten, you won't believe it. They're not just beat. They beat.
Yeah, it's awful, but immediately those Belarusians who once fled repressions, who had to flee our country because of repressions, immediately started to help Ukrainian refugees. They helped them with food, with clothes, they joined organizations, voluntary organizations. Immediately, hundreds of Belarusian men started to organize their teams wanted to go to fight on the side of Ukrainians. Our media reoriented, they internal agenda, Belarusian agenda on Ukrainian agenda. We started to explain Belarusian people what's going on in reality. We urged them not to watch state TV because state TV reiterated a Russian narrative that Ukrainians are bombing themselves, about all this bullshit about Nazism and so on. And Belarusian people immediately started to make pictures of Russian equipment that was moving through territory of Belarus and sent those pictures and videos to Ukrainian army for them to be prepared for something. Our Belarusian activists started to disrupt railways, to stop military equipment that, Russians were used Belarusian railway to bring...
to move the army.
Yeah, to move the army, and Belarusians made acts of sabotage to stop this equipment. And Russian troops, Russian army didn't find Belarus as a safe place for themselves. They were sure that, they will not meet any... сопротивление, resistance, thank you. But and Belarusian army didn't participate in this war, and it's not the merit of Lukashenko. Now here or there I can hear voices that Lukashenko didn't let his army
into Ukraine.
Yeah. But it's not it's not truth. Our soldiers, they didn't understand why they have to fight against Ukrainian people. They are our brothers and sisters. They don't want to die because of ambitions of two dictators. And immediately we started campaign explaining mothers of the soldiers that, look, your children can die there. For what? They are not defending our country. They could be sent to die because the wish of dictator. And there was such a demoralization among soldiers. It was such a desire of Belarusian people to help somehow Ukrainian people, to persuade our army not to participate, that we really don't know if this criminal order was given to our army. We have heard that Lukashenko made this order, go and fight, but it wasn't fulfilled. But it's not Lukashenko's victory that he didn't let our army to participate. At the beginning, Lukashenko told, look, me and Putin will capture Kiev in 3 days. He was sure that he will be on the side of winner, Kremlin, Putin, Russia, yeah. But when Ukrainian people showed the courage, showed how brave they are, showed the determination to defend Ukraine, Lukashenko immediately changed rhetoric. Look, we are not participating in this war. I don't know what's going on. Yeah, and now I urge democratic countries not to be fooled again by the regime. He shares the full responsibility for this war. He gave opportunity for Russian troops to bomb Ukraine from the side of Belarus. He's accomplice, he's collaborant in this war, and he has to feel all the consequences of his crime.
We wanted to look at a very short part of a documentary made by Andrei Kutsila, When Flowers Are Not Silent. The documentary is about the daily life in the times of democratic protest in Belarus. And it will be screened in the Balie on Saturday the 21st of May, but we took a little part out of it and want to have a look at it. And I also would like to ask Franek Viachorka to join us and join the conversation a little bit after we look at, please come up or before or afterwards. You are the main political advisor and a journalist from Belarus. So let's have a short look and maybe continue our conversation after that.
Очень плохая привычка делать все уроки, особенно устные, лежа. И засыпаешь. Так, политическая карта мира и особенности ее формирования. Это этот параграф?
Второй.
О, в чем различие между страной и государством?
Ну, я скажу вам кратко. Страна это та страна, которую кто-то управляет, которая не сама по себе. А государство это страна, когда она сама по себе, когда ей никто не управляет. Вот, допустим, приведу пример. Раньше Индия, там, до нашей эры, была государством, она была сама по себе. Но в 17 веке там Великобритания ворвала свои территории и начала ей управлять. И они стали обычной страной.
Вот очень хороший вопрос. А у нас Беларусь страна или государство?
Ну, типа, как говорят государство, но я думаю, что там и Россия нами управляет. Типа, я думаю, и страна, и просто государство. И то, и то.
Интересно.
Почему не каждую страну?
Можно назвать государством.
Ну, потому что есть такие некоторые богатые страны и влиятельные, которые богаче и могут и заодно еще их и обеспечивать. И те страны, которые нету суверенитета, им так легче вообще справляться и жить, я так думаю. Допустим, у нас в Европе, у нас же там в Евросоюзе, там все друг другу помогают, решают какие-то важные вопросы, которые там всемирным масштабом. Не одна сторона, а все вместе сразу. Но они же и слегка тоже управляют друг другом. Эти государства тоже. А нам никто из них не может вообще помочь. Мы им просто не нужны, невыгодны. Вот. Или они просто боятся России.
Please, welcome. Franak Wiatczorka, if I pronounce it rightly, I hope, main political advisor, and the last sentence the boy says, and actually if you want to see the whole movie, do come back at the 21st of May, we're going to show it, it's a wonderful, moving movie, documentary, but I'm just wondering what he says. He says, they don't care about us, there's no benefit for them, European Union, which I can understand. How would you look upon that? What would you say to the boy?
That's existential discussion here.
Yeah.
But he also said that perhaps they're afraid of Russia. And I think this is...
Yeah, that's right. He says that too.
This is the problem we actually faced in 2020 and 2021. Speaking to different politicians, and we always say, yes, we want to help you, but but Russia, it's so difficult, gas and oil, there are so many problems, and they always use Russia as excuse to not do things. And many of them are really afraid of Russia. Many of them do not want to have troubles in relations with Russia and to not disrupt the businesses.
Yeah.
But Belarus was always somehow victim of these very weird relations with Russia of many, many European states. And only right now, when this war started, these illusions and this weirdness started to disappear. Russia somehow managed to keep half of the world in fear just by creating this bubble, this illusion of all-mightness, of superpower, full army. And as we see, Ukrainians show it's not true. This bubble just disappeared after a few days. And right now, I think it's a very good moment for countries like Belarus to restore their rights for self-determination. Not only for Belarus, but also for Ukraine, but also for Moldova, for Georgia, for Armenia, because for many years, Western world saw our countries as the part of Russian sphere of influence. But perhaps right now, that's the moment to review this vision of our country and to recognize that Belarus, same as Ukraine, deserve the right to decide our future, their future by themselves. As for interests, this is another problem. One is fear of Russia, and second is about interests. The world for many years was somehow led by interests. But we, in 2020, we started to teach and to explain. You should build your politics not on interests, but on values.
On
Values.
On values, yeah.
Values. And so look for the countries, look for the people who share your values. And you see Belarusians, they belong to your value system. And therefore you should support it. Not because you see or you don't see interests in Belarus.
Yeah, that's very well put. We didn't support people in Kiev and Ukraine with our values, of course, a little bit, but would you think that if we would have listened not to our interests, but to our values, you think in 2020, when we saw the picture of the hundreds of thousands of people there in Minsk, and you think that the coin could have flipped the other way, that we could have gotten rid of the last dictator? Well, by now there are a lot more, but then he was the last dictator in Europe?
No, I'm sure that if the European countries and the USA and Canada reacted much faster to our requests to help us with sanctions, to help us with isolation, maybe we could achieve what we wanted, because it was huge a prize and people were so inspired, by our awakening. But the first sanctions, strong sanctions, have been imposed in 10 months after fraudulent elections, after hijacking of Ryanair flight.
10 months, yeah.
Maybe, I always want to justify everybody, and maybe it happened because European countries didn't know a lot about Belarus. We were perceived as appendix of Russia. I started to meet with, politicians in different countries, and I had to explain that, look, Belarus is not part of Russia. We are a separate country with separate language, with separate culture. We want changes. We want our country to be prosperous. And we reopened Belarus. Many months we reopened in Belarus for democratic countries, and I think that a lot of it was like discovery for many politicians that Belarus is not like part of Kremlin. It was rather difficult, I have to say. So this very slow reaction on human rights abuses, on violence, on tortures, maybe didn't give us, the last drop into this cup of patience, of fight. But, I just, who knows how it could turn. But the fact is that reaction was rather slow. The European Union behaved as years before, then small sanctions, then in a couple of months, small sanctions. But, it in the eyes of dictators, it looks like weakness. That they will never impose strong sanctions. Lukashenko always thought about European Union, and I think that Kremlin also was sure that European Union and the USA would never dare to to impose such strong sanctions on the oligarchs, on the enterprises.
Like they did after the yeah. So am I correct in understanding that your evaluation would be that if we would have acted firmly and swift on Lukashenko stealing the elections, it would have sent a different signal to the other dictator to the east, to Putin, that that there will be a firm reaction. So actually, that our weak reaction sent a message to the Kremlin that we would not do anything. Is that?
I think the slow reaction, it created the feeling of impunity.
Mm-hmm.
So you see, he put 30,000 people in jail, no sanctions. He hijacked
30,000 people?
30,000 people were detained from August 2020 through March 2021. And then there were less detentions per day, but still they continued every day. And no strong reaction. Yes, they put sanctions on first 70 people, then it was 130 people, but no real economic limitations. Then Ryanair hijack, yes, reaction was very fast and it was smooth, but still, the sanctions had very many a lot of loopholes. So they managed somehow to avoid the sanctions. Then migration crisis. And they started to think, oh gosh, sanctions don't work. They don't work because, you didn't close loopholes. And the dictators felt impunity. Lukashenko felt impunity. Putin felt impunity. And Europe says, we will close potash delivery. We will impose sanctions on potash. And Lukashenko didn't believe this real sanctions on potash will be imposed because they even didn't manage to build the terminal in Murmansk as they promised. Right now, real sanctions are imposed and there is no terminal in Murmansk as they promised because they really didn't believe Europe will take this strong measure. So we see it right now. And this feeling of impunity, it perhaps impacted the decision of Putin to attack on Ukraine. He saw that there is no strong steps, Europe is not united enough. And even if he attacks Ukraine, Europe will think for another 8 months what to do with Russia. And the second impact of perhaps lack of decisiveness, that Belarus provided its territory to Russia. If Belarus revolution wins in 2020, if there will no crackdown on media, civil society, there will be much more voices in Belarus against Russian invasion on Ukraine, and there will no be Russian troops on our territory, definitely, shelling Ukrainian cities. So this is somehow also the result of lack of decisiveness. We can't say there was no strong steps. There were reaction, but perhaps it was not enough. And but now, Ukraine showed that Europe can take strong decisions. Even Germany, Netherlands, provided, serious, heavy weapons. It didn't take years, as many believed, as Putin perhaps believed. So it shows that Europe can do big things in support, in defense of values.
Yeah, by now there's actually going howitzers and armored vehicles going to Ukraine. I mean, it took, in my opinion, but that's my personal opinion, quite a while to do that. But now they are starting to even provide heavy weaponry. What do you think that would be required from the European Union or NATO to, in regard to Kiev and Ukraine and the war there? Would be the next best steps for Western Europe, or for Europe, for the Union to do?
Right now, it's very important to support Ukraine, because Ukraine is fighting for entire Europe right now. It's not only fight for Ukraine or for Belarus, but for each of us here in this room as well. So that's very important, and therefore Belarusian volunteers and medics are joining so actively different initiatives and helping Ukraine and fighting. Today, our colleague who joined Belarus battalion in Ukraine, he said that several guys were injured from battalion Kalinovsky. So almost every 2 weeks they lost someone from their brothers. And this is a real war. And I think we must make sure that they have full support. They are well equipped because this is the guarantee that, or it will increase their chance to win. And the second thing, consistency. The problem is that the European
consistency
because
in what
Western
respect?
politicians, they're very often led by media, by public attention, public pressure, and every topic after some time, it's getting buzzword, people are getting tired of discussing Belarus all the time. The people will be tired of discussing Ukraine all the time. Politicians will feel it, will be not pressurized anymore by media, by TV channels and newspapers, and we start to look for other problems to solve and to become relevant. And therefore, it depends on us, people, citizens, to keep this topic always on the top of the agenda, to keep Belarus and Ukraine on the top of the agenda, to force politicians to make steps.
Yeah, I just wanted to say how it's important to support not only politicians but also ordinary people. And today in the Netherlands, I visited new organization on initiative. It's very difficult to pronounce. It's in Dutch, but Ukrainians together with Belarusian people have been fundraising to buy ambulances for Ukrainian army. Already 26 ambulances have been sent to Ukraine. One fire machine, and a lot of humanitarian aid. Every person can do something for Ukraine at the moment. It's not only up to politicians. Everybody has to understand his own or her own responsibility for the outcome of this war, and make small steps, help refugees, help those who fundraising for Ukrainian army, tell on a daily basis about the situation in Ukraine, in Belarus. It will be very, very helpful for us.
Because Frank, you said at this moment Ukraine is fighting for its life, its territory, but it is fighting for us here in this room as well. Could you explain it a little? You're very eloquently explaining, what it is about values, and could you explain it a little bit more? Because I think for a lot of people, that last part is still hard to understand. Why are they fighting for us?
So we see Putin is the person from the past. So if you want to explain your kids what is Soviet Union, Cold War, this crazy Soviet politicians, show them the video of Putin, his peoples, his meetings, to let them understand what is this. And now the past, embodied by Putin, is taking revenge. Is taking revenge on our reality and also on our future. They think that at some point the history took the wrong direction, and this past is trying to turn this wrong direction back to the direction they want. And the set of their values is not correspondent with our set of values we all share in this room. So right now, this is not about only punishing Ukraine for being too democratic or turning away from Putin, but it's about trying to turn back the history, to turn our reality back to the era of spheres of influence, to show that it's normal to change the borders of countries in 21st century, something which is impossible to realize here, could you imagine, right now, changing the borders with Belgium and Germany? It's crazy, but Putin thinks it's normal. He writes an article, and he published this article in the serious newspapers in Russia, saying that Ukrainian statehood is fake, that Belarus does not deserve to have their own country, that territories in Crimea shouldn't be part of Ukraine. And they even built a theory explaining this argument, for taking the land and destroying and killing thousands of people. And this is what is Putinism is right now. And this is something Ukrainians are fighting against. And if we want Europe to get back to the past of Cold War, of changing borders, of mass killings with no punishment, then we, of course, can leave Ukraine alone, because it's its problem. But if we want to protect our reality, our values we have right now, and the path Europe and the entire civilized world have chosen of human dignity, of human rights, free economy, free travel, then we have to do something for this. Now the history needs each of us. You cannot just stay alone and watch. It's not Netflix movie. It's something where you are a participant, even if you are not in Ukraine, still you can participate by donating, by sending the message, by supporting Belarusian political prisoners. And this is something each of us, our kids, our parents, grandparents in Belarus and Netherlands, United States, must realize.
I'm going to the audience. Maybe there are a few, actually very many Belarus citizens here. There are other people here, so maybe there are questions or remarks. The one last question, and then we go to the audience. You can think about your question. Now there's a war, there's a real war going on, and it looks like the Ukrainians at the moment are at least holding. Is there, how do you think if this ends in a stalemate or in a victory for Zelensky and Ukraine, what would that do to the Belarusian situation, to the Belarus situation?
You said if Zelensky wins?
Mm-hmm.
When Zelensky wins? When Ukraine wins this war, it will mean that Kremlin is extremely weak, because they have already failed morally in this war, and when it will be the end of the war, it means that they will fail in power. And hence, Lukashenko will be as fragile as never before. Kremlin is weak, Lukashenko is weak. And it will be a huge new window of opportunities for Belarusian people to get rid of this regime. And we feel strong, we feel healthy. I mean, our civil society, we feel united, and we will manage not to waste this new opportunity. And we already have the core of future Belarusian army. Our battalions are fighting on the side of Ukraine. So these changes will happen at that very moment when Lukashenko, will be at his weakest point.
So is there anybody who has, yes, please, over here, the gentleman in the white t-shirt. Yeah. We will hold it for you.
All right. Yeah. Thank you. My name is Yehor, and I wanted to ask, could you please tell me what's your relationship with Mr. President Zelensky and how it changed throughout the last couple of months?
It's a reasonable question. Thank you. You know that during all these months of our fight against dictatorship, President Zelensky was very cautious about communicating with democratic forces. I think it happened because he didn't want to irritate Lukashenko. Lukashenko promised then while he's in the power, there will be no attack from the side of Belarus on Ukraine. But it was like knife into back from Lukashenko, and it opened eyes for President Zelensky as well. So, but now the reality is different. Now the war in Ukraine, and maybe President Zelensky is still a little bit cautious, but we have good working contacts. Our team is communicating with the team of Zelensky, with the parliament, with his advisors, and recently my representative went to Kiev to open office there, to be in closer relationship with the government. And so since now I think we will manage to build closer contacts. I don't know when, but for sure this meeting will happen sooner or later. I mean, with President Zelensky, and we have to support our Belarusians there, our diaspora, to have closer relationship with our battalions. So it's the question of time. Thank you.
And the lady over there with the beautiful thing on her arm.
This is Sviatlana. Thank you very much. Lukashenko does seem to have, for an outsider, a power base in Belarus, and it's mainly in the police and the armed forces, as far as we can see. Is it possible for you in opposition to make inroads there? And that so I'm not saying if, I'm saying when Lukashenko is weak, that you actually can have some people that you can get in touch with in his power base to change the regime?
There are many people there who want changes, but they are afraid. They don't have the way out. Many of them, even in the army, people, when the war started, they didn't want to fight, but they say, we want to defect, we want to cross the border, but can you promise that our family will be safe? And the problem is that we couldn't promise anything. And this is the reason why we didn't see thousands of defectors from the nomenclatura, from army, from closer circle of Lukashenko, because he used the COVID as the pretext to close all the borders of Belarus. And also he established very deep control over everyone who works for state institutions and for government. But when there will be weakness of Lukashenko, there will be a moment of changes, when the system will start collapsing, you will see how quickly all these people, even very close to Lukashenko, those who are promoting Putin's war, those who are supporting Lukashenko, how they will change color. This always happens when regimes, such as Lukashenko's one, are collapsing. People feel very well the moment of changes. And it's interesting that last 2 months, we received more contacts than before, because people felt that Lukashenko made the wrong choice. He put all eggs in the wrong basket of Putin's. He made the wrong prediction that Putin will take Kyiv in 3-4 days, and they started to look for the way out. Also, we saw in last week, Lukashenko arrested several propagandists, including the vice president of the main state propaganda agency, Belta. Last 3 weeks, he arrested 2 presidents of the biggest state banks. He arrested 35 doctors, including his personal doctor, thinking that they are, or accusing them in possible betrayal, or we don't know what was the real reason behind it. So these are all signs of processes inside the system. And we hope these are signs also of fragility of the regime. And when some new trigger happens, everything could start collapsing very quickly. And of course, these people will be changing colors, looking for the way out, and starting to think how they can serve New Belarus, hopefully.
The lady over there with the blue shirt. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm very grateful to being here tonight, and listening to your words is very meaningful to me. My name is Carolina Barrero. I am an opposition from Cuba. Maybe Cuba sounds far away, but the same structure of power, all the words you have said, everything, the situation you have described, it could be used to describe what is happening in my country for almost 7 decades. On July the 11th, also, the people in Cuba went to the streets, and after that, Díaz-Canel put in prison, we don't know exactly how many, but there are still at least 1,200. Many of them are children. A young boy of 18 called Roland Castillo has been condemned, sentenced to 18 years in prison, the same as your husband. This is a young boy of 18 years, the same years it has of life. I want to ask you, because I was forced to leave my country this February. I was forced into exile after I spent 60 months in house arrest and was part of the resistance and the protest movement there. And since I arrived 3 months ago, in my objective, I am now in an advocacy trip for Cuba and for the political prisoners. It is also to think in how important it would be for the resistance of all of the countries suffering dictatorship to unite. The tyrants are united. They have a great alliance. You know this, you have mentioned this, and I think so does the resistance of those tyrants should be alliance. So my question to you is, what do you think about that? What should we do together? Thank you.
Thank you. We realize that we are not the only country that is fighting with dictatorship, and fight for freedom is global. And we have to share experiences, how we fight with dictatorship. Maybe we could share with you our methods of fighting. You can give us your experience. It's very important to communicate between diasporas. You know, we have wonderful people here in Belarusian diaspora. I think that you have your position, people living here. You have to can be in contacts. We can share information about each other. You will speak about Belarus, we will speak about fight in Cuba, and only this way we will be helpful to each other. So thank you for your resistance.
I'm afraid I have to leave it at that. There are many more questions, I understand, but we have to close off. It's late already, and it was a very long day for Madam President. In a month's time, on Saturday 21st, we will organize So Far, Yet So Close, a day-long program on Belarus, films, art, activism, and the fight against authoritarianism from the Belarus perspective. We will also show When Flowers Are Not Silent, the film you just saw a little part of. And I would like to close this off, first of all, also with thanking the VEE-Fonds very, very much, because they made it possible. The 21st of May also, they participate in the Four Freedom Awards as well, by the way. Without them, we couldn't have realized this evening. And I would very much like to thank Ilya Sharbitsky, Dasha Slapchanka, Tasha Arlova and Lena Davidovich for working with us and making this day possible, for realizing tonight and the 21st. And of course, I would very much like to thank Franek Wiasorska for sharing his thoughts and insights. And I would very much like to thank Madam President for being here and for your endeavor, for your courage, and for being here. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Just last words. Живи Беларусь и слава Украине.